the gruesome tales of horror!
Oh, hello. You caught me in the middle of my vocal exercises. I'm Rita Mortison.
And I'm Bob.
Shut up, Bob.
No, I will not be silenced. I am the real brains behind this operation.
Really? I always thought you were rather empty-headed.
Oh, just introduce the story, Peaches.
My empty-headed friend is right. Our first story comes from Bit Pulp Volume One, and it's a real doozy. Let's just hope we don't all lose our heads.
Rose Wool by Franklin Johnson. Nora Shinders awoke from the same disturbing dream, and though she knew the room to be empty, some insecure part of her could not help but glance around. As always, she was alone. The sky, her only companion on nights like these, was black and still through the second-story window. She got out of bed and straightened her nightgown. With weary hands, she opened the window and breathed in the autumn air, letting it chill her lungs and drive away the remnants of the dream. A solitary crow cried into the night. Nora knew that it was a crow, not by the sound, but because they were the only birds that flew overhead these days. She went back to bed. Gerald's side was undisturbed. It was much too late for him to still be working. She leaned her head out the window and saw a light on in the barn. Perhaps Lola was finally calving. It was a rare occasion that Nora got to see one of her animals give birth, and it was Lola's first. So she went to the closet and grabbed one of Gerald's jackets and a pair of his boots. The stairwell from their bedroom was lined with old pictures. Nora sitting down at a large table with other members of the Red Hat Society. Gerald standing in a small fishing boat, holding a bloody striped bass. A young Nora leaning on a hotel observation balcony overlooking Molokai. Gerald had taken this picture just minutes before asking her name, and only hours before a frenzied, sweetly rough round of sex in a bathroom stall. He had been 34, she 25. Now their marriage spanned 31 years. There were no children. On the bottom step, Nora sat down and looked at Gerald's new boots. God only knew why a 65-year-old man insisted on candy apple red cowboy boots. Yet, he walked out of the store that day with a smile on his face. She put the boots on, noting that they were several sizes too big for her. They squeaked as she stood up. Gerald had not broken them in. She put on his jacket and realized on some level that she must look a little disturbed, standing there in a brown corduroy jacket that concealed only half of her faded sky blue nightgown and those bright red boots. Yet nothing else would be so comforting. She crossed the hall and found the answering machine. Neither Nora nor Gerald would be caught dead with a cellular telephone when standard phones were still working perfectly good. And Nora had a telephone in her office at the university. If someone wanted to talk to her, she could be reached one way or another, and no cancer-causing electronics would have to be involved. And their answering machine served quite nicely as a way to leave little notes for each other, though sometimes the notes would be heard much later than they were intended. Thus was the problem with resisting the societal toilet that was the cell phone craze. Nora pressed the button on the machine. "Hey, darling, it's Gerald." He never needed to say that. Who else would it be? Yet it was a beloved absurdity in Nora's tiny life. "I guess you're at work. I'm going to be home kind of late tonight. That Stephen Denton's got a load of grass seed that I've been meaning to pick up, but he's only available around 8 tonight. The prick, I bet it's 'cause he's going to be at that strip club in the city till then. Anyway, once I get home, I'm going to see to Lo, too. She looks ready to pop. I've got a feeling it's going to be tonight or early morning, so I probably won't get to bed till after that. But don't you worry about coming out and seeing her tonight. You'll get to look at the new edition tomorrow morning. Yeah, guess that's it. Love you, sugar butt. Gerald had then tried to hang up the receiver, but it evidently struggled. The sounds of plastic hitting plastic and garbled curses echoed from the speaker, and finally there was a click and the machine beeped. There were no more messages. He wants me to stay inside, she said aloud. How sweet. To hell with that. The wind picked up as Nora crossed the darkened gravel to the barn in the distance. The large doors were cracked open, and a slash of light illuminated the ground like a scar. She pushed the doors open a little more and stepped into the low amber light. Old hay crunched under her feet as she drifted through the vast interior of the barn. She was always surprised by the size of it. Really more of a multi-purpose garage or hangar, the barn was separated into many segmented stalls and vaguely resembled a beehive. Nora and Gerald had invested quite a bit of money into a milk and artisan cheese operation years before. The venture didn't pan out, but they were somehow able to keep the barn. These days they didn't care for so many animals, but Nora had insisted on keeping Lola and some others that had remained unnamed. Gerald, honey, she spoke into the dark. Nora checked Lola's stall, but the cow was absent. Maybe Gerald had somehow moved her to a bigger one. Certainly a birth had not happened here. The soft shavings on the floor of the stall had not been soiled. She went further into the barn. A light bulb in a low-hanging socket had been shattered, and glass shards littered the ground. It must have happened at some point while Nora was at work. Why hadn't Gerald fixed it? With how late it was, he had been home for quite a while. But maybe he didn't get the chance to in the rush to move Lola. There were only a few stalls remaining now. As she neared the last one, she heard the familiar thump of Gerald's work boots. She rounded the corner and saw her husband's back and broad shoulders. He was kneeling over a lamb that lay on its side. Its legs twitched, and it bleated with wide staring eyes. It struggled to stand, but Gerald would not let it go. One hand was on the lamb's throat. Some of its wool was stained red. Gerald's head jerked from side to side, and the lamb bleated desperately against a ripping tearing sound. A spiderweb of veins erupted in its eyes, pulsing with the sudden load on its heart. The lamb thrashed wildly, scattering hay and wood shavings. Its pupils ratcheted between contracted and dilated, and the creature screamed a final time before its eyes rolled up into its head and collapsed. Gerald bent his head to the lamb's stomach and tore again. A pool of candy apple blood began spreading around his boots. A soft, wet crunching reverberated off the walls of the stall. The lamb's leg twitched again before Gerald brought it to his mouth, and Nora heard a moist cracking. "Gerald?" she squeaked. Her husband looked over his shoulder, and Nora saw that his once green eyes were tainted with red. He stood up, and Nora screamed as she looked at him. His flannel shirt was in tatters across the belly, and a large portion of Gerald's stomach was torn away. There was a cavity now, and some of his intestines dangled freely, red and dripping. She trembled and wanted to move, but couldn't. Her bladder let go. Gerald drooled and took a labored step forward. Small bits of meat and wool shone from between his teeth. His face was adorned with a red beard of blood. Still, Nora's legs wouldn't move. Gerald, honey? Oh, God. She wept openly as what was left of her husband began walking faster toward her. His arms came up, fingers curling and reaching. Nora managed a small step back, then her legs would move no further. He quickened his pace, and Nora closed her eyes, shaking uncontrollably. She felt his presence, felt the heat coming off his ruined body. She was roughly bent, exposing her collarbone like he had at Molokai, and for the smallest moment she felt the teeth touch her skin. Her screams filled the barn, as somewhere overhead a crow flew off into the night.
My, that was certainly bone-chilling. I hope nobody fell apart.
I tell you, that story sure shows the deterioration of marriage today.
Oh, so true.
Though, to be honest, after so many years of marriage, anyone would begin to fall apart.
You would know. Your wife takes your head off at the tiniest things. What was your last argument about?
Oh, she burned dinner, so I lost my head.
That's enough, Bob.
Okay,